Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Lucas Maddox bought a secluded lakeside cabin to escape the chaos, he expected peace. What he got was war. A ruthless HOA, a power-hungry woman named Karen, and a fight for land, freedom, and survival. This isn't just a property dispute. It's a battle for the soul of independence. I pulled up the gravel road just past noon, my old Ford pickup rattling with every bump, the trailer groaning behind me like it was just as tired as I was. The dog in the passenger seat, Bentley, my stubborn old Labrador, gave a disapproving huff as if to say, "This better be worth it." We crested the final hill, and there it was, the cabin. No, not a cabin, my cabin. It sat nestled right at the edge of Pinefall Lake, a weathered old ranger's outpost, half swallowed by trees, with its dock bones barely clinging to the shoreline. There was moss on the roof, a nest of squirrels in the porch eaves, and I swear the outhouse looked at me funny. But to me, it was perfect. I cut the engine and sat there a moment, breathing in the air. Pine, damp earth, and silence. Real silence. Not city silence, where you can still hear your neighbor sneeze through drywall. This was earned silence. I stepped out and stretched, my boots crunching on gravel, a cool breeze rustling through the trees like they were whispering, "Welcome home." Bentley leapt out, sniffed a bush, and peed on it like a landowner marking territory. Fair enough. I made coffee first. Priorities. Portable stove on the porch, propane hissing, a chipped enamel mug from my glove box. As the water boiled, I walked the perimeter. Each of the 4 geodetic boundary markers was right where they should be, flagged and stamped. I had GPS pins on my phone, printed coordinates, a notarized copy of the land deed, auction confirmation from the Department of Natural Resources, and a USB drive in my pocket with everything backed up twice. I wasn't just prepared, I was legally bulletproof. Or so I thought. The coffee was just starting to brew when I heard the tires, big ones, angry ones. A screech of rubber on gravel echoed through the trees like a warning shot. I turned around slowly, still holding my mug, and saw a shiny black SUV barreling up the road like it was owed the right of way by God himself. It stopped abruptly just outside my new gate, the kind that didn't even have time to rust yet. The SUV had a magnetic logo on the side, Echo Shores Reserve HOA, of course it did. The driver's door flung open with the kind of force that screamed, "Power trip," and out stepped a woman in a cream-colored pantsuit that looked like it cost more than my truck. Blonde bob, clipboard, HOA lanyard swinging like a badge. 2 men climbed out behind her, both wearing matching embroidered polos and squints that smelled like compliance audits. She didn't walk. She marched. "You are on land controlled by Echo Shores HOA," she barked. "Not even a hello. Structures of this type are not permitted. You are to cease all activity and vacate the premises immediately." I stared at her a second, then looked down at my mug like maybe I'd missed a hallucinogen packet in the coffee. "Pardon? This structure," she gestured like the cabin offended her ancestors, "violates community standards. This entire area falls under HOA jurisdiction. You're trespassing." I took a slow sip. "Ma'am," I said carefully, "this property was state-owned until 2 years ago. I bought it through a public land auction last month. I have documentation, coordinates, and border markers verified by a state surveyor. Your HOA stops a quarter mile over that ridge." Her eyes narrowed. "That's a matter to be decided at a board meeting. Until then, we expect voluntary compliance. Otherwise, we'll be contacting law enforcement to report unauthorized occupation of community recreational land." I set my coffee down and took a breath. I didn't move aggressively, didn't raise my voice, just calmly reached into my vest pocket and pulled out a laminated printout of the boundary survey, unfolded it, and held it out. "See this line here?" I pointed. "This is the legal edge of your HOA zone. And this," I tapped the red highlighted section where the cabin stood, "is me. This land is mine. You're not just wrong. You're trespassing." Her smile was like ice under a heat lamp, about to melt, but not without trying to ruin everything in the process. "Then we'll see how long that paper holds up in court," she snapped. "Enjoy the peace while you can. You'll find living outside the community doesn't make you immune to the consequences of disharmony." She turned on her heel like a villain in a soap opera, signaled her polo boys, and got back into the SUV. They didn't leave right away. just sat there at the edge of my property like wolves that thought the fence was optional. They finally pulled away 10 minutes later, tires spitting gravel like venom. I stood there in the quiet, the lake glinting behind me, birds chirping like nothing had happened. But something had. That wasn't just a bad neighbor. That was the HOA queen bee, and she had her eyes on my hive. I didn't sleep much that first night. Not from fear. Hell, I've camped in bear country with nothing but a knife and a thermos, but from that creeping sense of what the hell just happened. I kept replaying the encounter with Karen in my head, her smug tone, the way she tossed around jurisdiction like it was hers to assign. People like that didn't bluff. They believed the world owed them obedience, and if it didn't kneel fast enough, they started kicking. So I wasn't surprised when the cops showed up the next morning. They rolled in around 9, a blue and white sheriff's department SUV rumbling up my road a whole lot less aggressively than Karen's tank. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, mug in hand. Same enamel one from yesterday, though this time it was full of bitter black resolve. Bentley barked once and then sat beside me, tail thumping in warning. The deputy was young, maybe 30. Name tag read Deputy Carson. He stepped out, adjusted his belt, and gave me the kind of look you give a guy holding a shotgun and a scone at the same time. Curious, but ready to duck. "Morning, sir. You Lucas Maddox?" I nodded. "That's me. And I'm guessing this isn't a welcome visit." He forced a half smile. "We received a complaint from Echo Shores Reserve HOA regarding alleged illegal occupancy and unauthorized development on community recreational land." There it was. I didn't raise my voice, didn't twitch, just took another sip and said, "You got 10 minutes? He blinked. Yeah? I turned and walked inside. Bentley followed. I could hear the deputy's boots crunch behind me a moment later. I grabbed my laptop, fired it up on the kitchen island, and popped in the USB stick I'd prepared for exactly this scenario. Not because I expected this exact thing, but because I've dealt with bureaucrats. Never go to a knife fight without a damn map and timestamps. I brought up the survey data first. Satellite overlays, the GPS stamped images, the old Ranger parcel lines, then the transfer deed from the Department of Natural Resources. Then the auction receipt, notarized, with state insignia watermarked right across the top. Deputy Carson leaned in, whistled low. "This is a lot more organized than I expected." "I run a construction business," I said. "I've seen subcontractors try to sue me for putting up walls on the wrong side of a fence. I come prepared." He chuckled under his breath, then grew serious. "Okay, look, I'm not here to give you trouble. We have to follow up when someone files a formal complaint. That's all this is, and what exactly did they say I was doing? Constructing an unauthorized structure on protected HOA recreation land, possible environmental disruption, and," he checked his notepad, "potentially armed and hostile. I couldn't help it." I barked a laugh. "Hostile, huh?" He gave me a wary glance. "Are you armed?" "My shotgun is locked in a safe. I'm not a maniac." Carson nodded. "That's good enough for me." He paused. "Can I take pictures of the documents?" "I'll attach them to the report." "Sure. Take the flash drive." "Hell, I've got backups." He scanned a few more files and then stood straight. "All right, Mr. Maddox. Far as I can tell, this is a civil dispute, and frankly, you've got every right to be here. No grounds for charges. I'll file this and advise them not to waste department time." I nodded. "Appreciate it." He was halfway to his car when he turned and added, "One thing, though, if they escalate, don't handle it alone. Call us. I've got cameras going up this week. They pull anything else, you'll have a movie." He left. No sirens, no citations, just gravel crunching under tires and dust hanging in the air like judgment. Later that afternoon, I got an email alert. My business's contact form, usually full of client inquiries or spam from Russian SEO bots, had a new message. Subject: Unauthorized structure, Echo Shores Review. Message: You are not exempt from our bylaws. This is not over. HOA Board Admin. No name, no direct threat, just poison wrapped in bureaucracy. That evening, I poured a stiff bourbon, sat by the lake, and watched the water pretend nothing was wrong. I could hear frogs and crickets, and the soft slap of waves against the shore, and just faintly, past the trees and the rise of the hill, echoing off their manicured streets. I swear I heard someone screaming into a boardroom speakerphone. The chainsaw started at 6:43 in the goddamn morning. I was still in bed, halfway between a dream about fixing the dock and one about strangling my old drywall supplier when the engine's snarl cracked through the silence like a gunshot. Bentley was up before me, barking like a demon, claws scraping across the hardwood as he bolted to the door. I threw on jeans, didn't bother with socks or a shirt, and stumbled onto the porch barefoot and pissed. 7 people stood at the southern boundary of my property. 3 of them had hard hats and neon vests. 2 held laminated maps. 1 operated a chainsaw like it owed him money. The last held a damn megaphone. "Sir," the man with the megaphone called, "for your safety, please return to your dwelling." This is an authorized safety clearance under EchoShore's HOA Ordinance 42. "Authorized by who?" I shouted back, walking toward them fast. One of the hard hats raised his hand. "We're performing a mandated safety pruning operation. There's an unstable tree encroaching on the community buffer zone. There's no community on this side of the ridge," I growled, stopping just short of the invisible boundary. "You're on private land." "My land. We have orders, sir," one of them said, barely looking up from his clipboard. That's when I saw the printed header, EchoShore's Reserve Environmental Stewardship Committee. Sounded official as hell. Only problem? It didn't exist on any registered state database. I glanced at the chainsaw guy, who was eyeing a perfectly healthy cedar like it had cussed at his mother. "Cut that, and we'll have a real problem," I warned. "We've been empowered to enforce shoreline safety compliance. You're violating—" "I don't give a damn what Karen told you." He froze. "Yeah, I said her name. Unless one of you has a county-issued warrant, a forestry permit, or a signed court order, you're trespassing," I continued. "You've got 10 seconds to pack up." One of them tried to push past me, muttering something about non-cooperation. That was a mistake. Bentley lunged before I could even blink, teeth bared, growling so deep it shook my chest. The guy stumbled back, tripping over his own boots and nearly falling into the bushes. I stepped up, calm but done pretending. I walked back to the porch, opened the gun locker behind the door, and brought out the 12 gauge. Didn't even chamber a shell. Just set it down against the porch rail, barrel pointed skyward, camera already rolling from the motion sensor above the door. "This is your official warning," I said loud and clear. "I have video and audio recording. This land is protected by state and federal law. You cross this line again, I press charges. Keep testing me, and I'll add attempted forced entry to the list." They hesitated. One guy was clearly ready to bolt. Another looked at the tree like maybe it wasn't worth it. But then one of the clipboard holders, trying to save face, marched forward and shouldered me. That was the spark. Bentley went for him. I grabbed his collar, pulled him back, but it was enough for chaos to break loose. The guy who got pushed, he tried to grab Bentley's leash. Another swung a clipboard at the dog. I shoved him away, and suddenly fists were flying. A chainsaw dropped and spun uselessly in the grass, and 2 of them crashed into the underbrush like drunk squirrels. It lasted maybe 15 seconds. Then sirens. I don't know who called them. Maybe a neighbor, maybe one of the idiots themselves. But when the sheriff's SUV screeched up the drive again, I already had the video paused at the perfect frame. The moment one of their boots crossed the survey flag. Same deputy as before. Carson. He stepped out, looked at the disheveled mess of sweaty men, dropped equipment, and my bare chest covered in scratches and said, "You've got to be kidding me." I handed him the flash drive before he asked. This one's labeled Assault and Lawn Drama. He spent the next 30 minutes taking statements, separating the morons, calming Bentley with a dog treat, and taking photos of the damage. Fence wire was bent. One of the old oak roots got clipped. Nothing catastrophic, but it wasn't just noise now. This was tangible. Before leaving, Deputy Carson pulled me aside and said, "This isn't just neighborly harassment anymore. You're in assault territory now." "I'd suggest filing charges. I intend to," I replied, "and I'll be adding HOA to the list. If they sent those guys, they're liable." He nodded, already annoyed. "You're not the first to say that." That night, I didn't sleep either. But this time, it wasn't stress. It was strategy. I wasn't the kind of guy who enjoyed lawyers. Nothing against them. Hell, I'd hired a few in my day for zoning permits and contractor disputes, but they always made me feel like I needed to check my pockets after every meeting. That said, by the time I'd washed the blood off my knuckles and iced Bentley's shoulder, he took a flying clipboard to the ribs. I knew it was time to law the hell up. Her name was Evelyn Thorne. Land use specialist, former state attorney, sharp as a tack, and about as warm as a cactus in winter. We met in the back corner of a tiny law office with wood paneling that hadn't seen a stain since the 80s. She wore a suit like she was expecting to walk into court mid-sentence and win before the judge blinked. I laid everything out: the deeds, the survey maps, the police reports, the incident footage. She didn't say much, just kept flipping pages and muttering things like, "Jesus," and "These people really think they're a government." When she finally spoke, it was the sound of gears clicking into place. "We're going to crush them." "I'm not looking for a war," I told her. She smiled. "You already got drafted." We filed 3 initial claims: criminal trespass with photographic and video evidence, assault and battery, including Bentley's attack as a defensive reaction, property damage to my fence, root system, and shoreline brush. But that was just the warm-up. Evelyn went digging, and what she found: it made Karen's clipboard fetish look like a parking violation. Turns out, the Echo Shores HOA had expanded their jurisdiction on paper sometime last year, quietly, without notifying the county. They'd filed an updated map that included a buffer zone stretching 300 feet beyond their actual plotted development. My land? Smack in the middle of that imaginary buffer. Worse, that new buffer zone was never approved. Not by the county, not by the zoning board, not by the DNR. It was a digital PDF uploaded to the HOA website, stamped with a fake internal approval code, ESR204B. Evelyn traced it back to a desktop computer registered to, take a guess, Karen Brady. She also found a series of HOA meeting minutes conveniently missing from the official record. The paper copies had references to acquisition of Lakeside asset for community enrichment. One even had a handwritten note in the margin: "Maddox's cabin ideal site for future pavilion." Yeah, real subtle. While Evelyn was gutting their administrative files, I was working my own angles. I filed a formal complaint with the State Department of Homeowner Associations. They launched a preliminary inquiry within 48 hours, and one of their compliance officers, a woman named Missy, who looked like she'd sued her own uncle for noise violations, showed up at Echo Shores with a clipboard and a smile that could slice granite. Karen wasn't happy about it. I know because Missy forwarded me the HOA's formal response, which included the phrase, "We believe the claimant is confused about property lines due to outdated cartography and personal emotional distress." Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, more neighbors came forward, some anonymously, some not. A guy who lived on the other side of the ridge said Karen once fined him $500 for parking his boat trailer. Crooked, a single mother, said she got a formal notice because her kid's sidewalk chalk was a visual nuisance. These people were done playing nice. By the end of the week, Evelyn filed a civil lawsuit in district court against the Echo Shores HOA and Karen personally. The charges included defamation, fraudulent jurisdiction expansion, malicious misuse of authority, endangerment, and negligence. But the cherry on top? We subpoenaed the HOA's financial records. Now, I'm no forensic accountant, but even I could tell something stank. There were maintenance fees paid to a contracting company owned by Karen's cousin. Thousands of dollars for shoreline safety assessments conducted by the same jackasses who tried to chainsaw my cedars. One record showed a payment labeled security mobilization, dated the day before they showed up with that megaphone. The storm was gathering. You could feel it in the wind. Karen must have known too, because 2 days after the suit was filed, someone put up a passive-aggressive sign at the ridge trailhead. Private property. Be respectful or be removed, printed on HOA branded vinyl with their logo. Still warm from the printer. I took it down, snapped a picture, and mailed it to Evelyn. She replied 2 minutes later, "Beautiful. Keep the sign." It's evidence now. The thing about bullies is when you punch back and they realize you're not going down easy, they stop playing by their own rules. They start making new ones. The lawsuit hit Echo Shores HOA like a pipe bomb in a porcelain shop. Evelyn filed it on a Monday. By Wednesday, the neighborhood Facebook group, previously limited to bake sale announcements and lost cats, had mutated into a digital witch hunt. I wasn't in the group, obviously, but screenshots started making their way to me from some sympathetic souls behind enemy lines. Posts like, "Does anyone know who this Maddox guy really is? Background checks anyone. He has guns." I saw one on his porch. Should kids really be playing near that kind of element? He lives alone. With a dog. Creepy. Then came the flyers. Actual printed flyers. Someone stuffed them in mailboxes around Echo Shores and a few neighboring properties. One neighbor left it on my gate, folded in half. No note. Across the top in bold, unstable new resident? Know the warning signs. Below, a bulleted list of complete bullshit, aggressive behavior, hoarding weapons, frequent conflicts with authority, questionable land acquisition. It was like they took every episode of Dateline and mashed it together under my name. Then things got sneakier. I found the first camera while walking Bentley along the West Trail, about 100 feet from the ridge that separates my land from the HOA border. It was a little wildlife cam strapped to a tree, pointed not at deer paths or bird nests, but straight at my property line. Brand new. Still had the sticker on it. I left it, went home, came back at midnight in full camo, unscrewed it, yanked the SD card, and left a note in its place. Illegal surveillance of private property violates U.S. Code Section 1801. Good luck. The card contained 6 days of footage. Most of it was boring. But on one clip, I saw Karen, clearly, standing by the tree, pointing at my cabin, talking to someone off-screen. She didn't look angry. She looked surgical. I sent the footage to Evelyn, who replied with just one word: delicious. Things escalated from passive-aggressive to just aggressive 2 days later. Bentley started acting weird, wouldn't eat, whining, scratching at his stomach. I rushed him to the vet, and they found traces of a foreign toxin in his system. Nothing lethal, thankfully, but definitely ingested. I'd bet my damn truck someone tossed bait over the fence. I installed new floodlights, added 2 more cameras, and swapped out my mailbox for a locking steel unit that could survive a bear attack. I wasn't paranoid. I was awake now. Then came the move that proved Karen wasn't just dangerous. She was strategic. She filed a formal complaint to the county zoning board, alleging that my acquisition of the cabin was conducted under suspicious conditions and requested that the transaction be reopened for review due to irregular auction documentation. She was trying to invalidate the sale itself. Like if she couldn't beat me in court, she'd just rewrite history. Evelyn, of course, had a full aneurysm in legalese. Not only is that nonsense, she snapped over the phone, but if they do open a review and we prove she knowingly submitted false allegations, we add perjury and abuse of process to her charges. This woman is digging her own grave with a golden shovel, but it wasn't just legal now. It was personal, psychological. My inbox was flooded with spam. I started getting robocalls from non-existent debt collectors. One email said my business was being reported to the Better Business Bureau for fraud. Another claimed I was under federal investigation. They even tried to review bomb my company. My website, my Google business page, suddenly all full of 1-star reviews from customers who never existed. Contractor never finished my garage. Shoddy work, overcharged, screamed at my kids. Showed up drunk and reeking of fish. Fish? Evelyn and I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, metadata. We filed defamation reports, requested subpoenas for IPS. I hired an IT guy named Jordan, freelancer, works out of a van, probably legally invisible, who scrubbed my online presence clean in 48 hours and set up alerts for any future bullshit. But the kicker was the HOA's emergency board vote. Apparently, they held a closed-door session to pass a motion allowing temporary security enforcement actions for volatile edge zone properties. It was vague as hell, probably on purpose. I got a copy of the internal memo from a source I didn't even know I had. A woman named Sharon, an HOA board member who clearly had second thoughts about the direction things were going. She emailed me anonymously. I didn't sign up for this. They're out of control. If you need testimony, I'll come forward. But be careful. They're getting desperate, Bentley, and I sat on the porch that night, shotgun across my lap, watching the tree line. Somewhere in that darkness, I knew someone was still watching me, but they weren't the only ones anymore. Now I was watching back. I woke up to the smell of smoke. Not campfire smoke, not someone burning leaves smoke. This was darker, acrid, sharp with chemicals and char. The kind of smell that says something is wrong before your brain finishes the sentence. Bentley was already at the window, barking like mad. I grabbed the shotgun, barefoot again, heart thudding, and rushed outside. The boathouse was on fire. Flames licked up the far wall, snapping through dry cedar like it was kindling. One side had already collapsed, and a piece of the roof sagged like melting cardboard. Sparks jumped into the black sky, catching the breeze and dancing over the lake like fireflies possessed. I didn't panic. I went cold. I sprinted to the lake pump, grabbed the emergency hose line I'd installed that first week, and started spraying down the surrounding trees, then the cabin's rear wall. I knew I couldn't save the whole boathouse, not with a single hose and lungs full of smoke, but I could stop it from spreading. I had to. By the time the fire department arrived 20 minutes later, bless their sleepy rural hearts, I had the blaze mostly contained. A full corner was gone. The aluminum canoe I'd bought secondhand was just a puddle. But the cabin, the dock, the trees, still standing. The chief, a heavy-set guy with eyes like burned-out coals, walked over and said, "You're lucky." Another 10 minutes, and this would have taken the whole side of the lake. I looked at him, eyes watering, shirt soaked, and said, "This wasn't luck. We found the gas can behind the boathouse, old, dented, no fingerprints. But there was a trail, tiny splash marks leading from the tree line, and a boot print in the mud. Women's hiking boot. Size looked about right. I didn't say Karen's name out loud. I didn't have to. The look I gave the fire chief said it for me. He radioed in a report. I called Evelyn. "Attempted arson," she repeated, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Oh, she's done. She's absolutely done. We submitted everything. The fire report, photos, the boot print, and, most importantly, the footage. The motion camera I'd installed facing the path to the dock, it caught a silhouette, a hooded figure creeping out of the woods, lighter in hand. It wasn't 4K cinema quality, but it was enough to show gait, shape, posture. You could even see the flash of a ponytail when the wind caught it. Evelyn had a private investigator review the footage. She didn't even wait for his full report before forwarding it to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Yes, the ATF. Because now we weren't just dealing with property damage. This was arson with malicious intent, potentially tied to organized HOA corruption, and, if proven, interference in an active civil case. Federal jurisdiction kicked in like a steel-toed boot through a door. Within 48 hours, federal agents visited Echo Shores. Not gently. Warrants in hand, they combed through the HOA's clubhouse, Karen's home, and even her damn golf cart. They found backup drives with digital maps of my property, marked with notes like potential event space and HOA annexation, multiple fake internal memos referencing shoreline jurisdiction, -A binder labeled compliance strategies, which included photos of my cabin, annotated with things like noise citations, visual disruption, and, I kid you not, remove or absorb. -A flash drive titled Project Clean Sweep, password protected. A TF cracked it in 3 hours. Karen was arrested on Thursday. She didn't scream, didn't flail, just stood on her porch in a coral sweater set, arms crossed, mouth tight. Like she still believed it was all some misunderstanding that would sort itself out once the peasants remembered their place. But it didn't stop there. 3 other HOA board members were brought in for questioning. One flipped almost immediately, admitting they knew Karen had an aggressive plan for property consolidation and that the patrolling crew from earlier paid under the table, funded by HOA dues without member approval. The financial records Evelyn subpoenaed weeks ago suddenly took center stage. Turns out, over $60,000 in special assessments had been rerouted through dummy accounts and used for Karen's little HOA militia, landscape sabotage, and God knows what else. It was a house of cards. One spark, and I wasn't just talking about the fire, was all it took to bring it down. That night, I stood by the charred remains of my boathouse, arms crossed, breathing in smoke and justice. Bentley sat next to me, tail thumping against the dirt, eyes watching the ridge. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loaded, like the forest was waiting for the next move. Only this time, I wasn't alone. I had the law, and I had receipts. The courtroom smelled like cold coffee and disinfectant. I sat at the plaintiff's table, tie choking my neck, palms flat on a thick stack of files. Evelyn stood beside me, pacing like a panther in heels, laser pointer in hand, eyes sharp enough to cut drywall. Across the room sat Karen. No more pearls, no clipboard. Just a beige blazer that tried to scream, misunderstood civic leader, and failed miserably. Her lawyer, some sunken-eyed HOA defense hound flown in from Portland, looked like he was trying to defend a bear trap filled with dynamite. The trial had been fast-tracked. Public safety risks, federal crimes, active fraud. The judge wanted it off his desk before someone else tried to light my house on fire. The courtroom was packed. Locals, reporters. A few familiar faces from Echo Shores who looked like they'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Evelyn opened with precision. She laid out the timeline, The fake buffer zone, the fraudulent HOA documents, the repeated trespassing, the environmental violations, the defamation campaign, the physical assault incident, and, of course, the attempted arson. She presented maps, photos, surveillance clips, and the pièce de résistance, the flash drive labeled Project Clean Sweep. I watched the jury when that one dropped. Half of them leaned forward. One woman actually gasped. It was a full PowerPoint presentation made by Karen herself, detailing how to neutralize outlier properties around Echo Shores for community harmony. The language was chilling. Phrases like gradual legal absorption through aggressive complaint filings, disruptive ownership equals candidate for soft pressure displacement, escalation protocol, step 3, code enforcement, and reputational compromise. It wasn't a strategy. It was a damn war plan. Karen's defense tried to claim it was a thought exercise, a draft proposal never meant for execution. But then we pulled up the payment logs, the security team payroll, the contractor invoices tied to her cousin's shell company, the off-book HOA expense memos. Then Evelyn called the surprise witness, Sharon, the same board member who'd warned me weeks ago. She walked into that courtroom in a modest floral dress, but when she took the stand, her voice had steel in it. She told the jury how Karen manipulated board votes, how she threatened dissenting members with fines and social exclusion, how she held secret meetings to discuss containment options for me, how she diverted HOA funds to personal use and enforcement experiments. By the end of Sharon's testimony, the room was dead quiet. Then Evelyn pulled out the final nail. A forensic report confirming that the HOA maps submitted to the county zoning board, used in Karen's attempt to reverse the land sale, were digitally altered, stripped of metadata, and uploaded from a personal IP address registered to Karen's home. Router. It was over. The judge didn't even let it drag. He read the verdict like he was throwing rocks in a pond. Guilty. On multiple counts. Fraudulent misrepresentation, malicious prosecution, attempted coercion of property rights, falsification of legal documents, organization of illegal private enforcement, attempted arson. Karen Brady was sentenced to 14 years in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 7. But that wasn't all. The court ordered the immediate dissolution of Echo Shores HOA. Its funds were frozen, assets liquidated. Every homeowner got a letter within the week. Your HOA has been terminated by court order due to systemic abuse and criminal activity. They were free. Some celebrated. Others panicked, unsure what life would look like without Karen micromanaging their lawn height. But for the first time in years, people had a say again. Democracy had bulldozed the dictatorship. As for me, I walked out of that courthouse not with swagger, but with relief. The kind that settles into your spine and reminds you what peace actually feels like. On the steps outside, Evelyn shook my hand. Told you we'd crush them. I nodded. You did. And now I've got about 50 feet of scorched shoreline to rebuild. She smiled. Good thing you're a builder. We parted ways just as a reporter rushed up asking for a statement. I gave them a quote. Then I went home. It took 6 months to rebuild the boathouse, not because it was big or complicated or because I didn't know what I was doing, but because I refused to rush it. I wanted every nail, every board, every shingle to be mine. No contractors. No permits I didn't ask for. Just me, Bentley, a stack of cedar planks, and the quiet lap of Pine Fall Lake. The new dock was wider, stronger. I added a built-in bench at the end facing west, so I could watch the sun drown behind the tree line every evening with a beer in one hand and the dog snoring at my feet. I even mounted an old ship bell beside the door of the new boathouse, salvaged from a flea market in Coeur d'Alene. I rang it the day I hammered in the last nail. Victory Bell. Across the ridge, Echo Shores looked different, less pristine. The uniform flower beds had grown wild. A few fences were leaning. Some folks moved out, tired of the spotlight. Others stayed and seemed almost relieved. I caught one of the former board members walking his poodle along the trail once. He nodded at me. Nothing more, but it was the kind of nod that says, "You were right, and I'm glad I didn't end up in court with her." Karen, still locked up in Boise. Last I heard, she was trying to appeal, citing psychological distress caused by excessive civic responsibility. I almost choked on my coffee when I read that. The land itself felt different too, safer. Not just physically, I doubled the security system, installed motion lights, and added a few trail cams with night vision, but spiritually. The air was lighter. The woods felt like they breathed easier without clipboards lurking in the shadows. One morning, I built a sign and mounted it to a cedar post near the edge of the property line. Private property, legally owned and defended. No HOA. No exceptions. Below it, I bolted a second plaque. Just 6 words. We tried civility. You chose fire. It got attention. Some YouTuber with a drone flew over and made a whole video about the cabin that destroyed an HOA. Got 1 million views in a week. I didn't mind. Let the story travel. Maybe somewhere out there, another Karen's just starting her reign of nonsense. Maybe this will make someone think twice. I even started getting mail. Real mail from people across the country. Letters from folks stuck in similar HOA nightmares. They thanked me. Asked for advice. One guy sent a photo of himself holding a sign that said, "Echo Shores No More," from his own front lawn in Ohio. That gave me an idea. So I started something. The Freehold Initiative. A small nonprofit aimed at helping private landowners navigate and fight against HOA overreach. I ran it out of the cabin. Simple website, volunteer lawyers like Evelyn, a hotline, free consultations. Within weeks, we had calls from 7 states. Apparently, what happened here wasn't rare. Bentley got older, grayer, slower, but he still patrolled the trail like a one-dog army. Every stranger got a bark. Every rustle in the bushes got a side eye. When people asked if he was dangerous, I'd say, only if you come with a clipboard. One evening, a boat drifted up to the end of my dock. Small, aluminum rental number still painted on the side. 3 people in pastel polos sat inside. I didn't recognize them, but I didn't need to. The posture was enough. Upright, judgy, like they were trying to decide whether the lake was too reflective for their taste. I stood at the end of the dock in full camo, mug of black coffee in one hand, shotgun slung over the other shoulder. They didn't say anything. I didn't either. After a long pause, the boat turned around and drifted away without a word. Bentley watched them go, tail thumping once. I scratched his ears and muttered, "That's right, boy. This shore's closed."